He gave her milk from his mouth, the homeless girl shouted, pointing at the millionaire's brother at the wedding in front of everyone. Then she hands a red bag to the jilted groom and reveals something no one expected. Comment giving my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The solemn silence of the historic church was shattered by the sound of tiny, bare feet running down the main aisle. Among the rows of elegantly dressed guests, a 4-year-old girl who looked more like 2 due to her extreme frailty advanced towards the altar. Her dirty, torn little dress contrasted brutally with the formal attire of those present, creating a spectacle that made hundreds of heads turn in her direction. The 30-year-old millionaire, a striking man who had amassed his fortune through shrewd investments in the stock market, stood before the altar. His blue eyes, normally confident and determined, now reflected absolute confusion as he watched the child approach. Beside him, the bride, heiress to one of the wealthiest families in the region, clutched her bouquet with trembling hands, her face paling with each step the girl took. "He gave me milk from his mouth," the little girl cried, her voice weak but audible throughout the church, pointing a skinny finger at the groom's older brother. The respected businessman, known for his investments in mutual funds and high-yield bonds, turned as white as a sheet. Shocked murmurs echoed among the guests, creating a cacophony of indignant whispers. The girl continued her determined walk until she reached the groom, extending a worn red shopping bag in her trembling hands. The fabric was so frayed that it looked like it would fall apart at the slightest touch. With careful movements, she opened the bag and removed 2 objects: a medicine bottle with a faded label and an old photograph of an unknown woman. "For you," the child murmured, placing the objects in the millionaire's hands. Her voice was so soft that only he could hear her clearly, but the impact of that moment reverberated throughout the church like a silent thunderclap. The groom examined the medicine bottle. The expiration date was more than a year past. The photograph showed a young woman with kind eyes, wearing a simple uniform he couldn't identify. Something about that face seemed vaguely familiar, like a distant memory struggling to surface. "What is going on here?" demanded the bride, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. Her family had built their wealth through generations of successful businesses, and this embarrassing situation was ruining what was supposed to be the wedding of the century in local high society. The groom's brother, a normally composed man who kept his assets diversified among different types of holdings, looked like he was about to faint. His hands trembled visibly as he looked at the girl, as if he were seeing a ghost. The other family members whispered among themselves, trying to understand the connection between this street child and their respectable family. "I don't know what she's talking about," the brother managed to stammer, but his voice sounded unconvincing even to himself. The truth was that he knew this girl very well. For months, he had found her on the streets near the upscale neighborhood where he grew up, always hungry, always alone. In secret, away from the judging eyes of his family, he gave her milk and whatever food he could spare. The bride dropped the bouquet, which fell to the floor, scattering white petals on the cold marble. "I'm not marrying into a family that hides sordid secrets," she declared, her voice echoing throughout the church. "This engagement is off." The chaos that followed was indescribable. Guests rose from their seats, some trying to leave discreetly while others remained to witness the scandal. Photographers who had been hired to document the ceremony now captured the most embarrassing moment of the millionaire's life. The girl, frightened by all the commotion she had caused, began to cry. Tears streamed down her dirty cheeks as she cowered at the altar, as if she wanted to disappear. The millionaire, moved by an instinct he couldn't explain, knelt beside her and wrapped her in his expensive suit jacket. "Don't cry," he whispered, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You did the right thing by coming here." But the girl only continued sobbing, repeating a single word between tears. "Mommy, Mommy." The groom's brother finally approached, his heavy breathing revealing something more than simple nervousness. "She's been showing up on the streets for months," he confessed in a low voice. I was just trying to help." "Help? How?" asked the millionaire, still holding the trembling child. "Giving her food, medicine when she got sick, but I could never figure out where she came from or where her family was." The church was emptying rapidly. The ex-bride's family left en masse, muttering legal threats and promises of revenge. The millionaire's net worth, built over years of hard work, now seemed threatened by lawsuits that were sure to come. But at that moment, looking at that fragile child in his arms, he made a decision that would change his life forever. No matter what his family thought, no matter what society said, he would discover the truth about that girl and the woman in the photograph. 2 weeks had passed since the disaster at the church, and the millionaire's life had turned into a labyrinth of questions and disturbing discoveries. He had taken the girl to his mansion, a decision that provoked an unprecedented family storm. His mother, a ruthless matriarch who controlled a significant portion of the family business, threatened to cut him off completely from the inheritance if he continued with this social madness. "You've completely lost your mind," the 60-year-old woman railed, pacing nervously through the luxurious living room. "Our family built this empire through smart decisions, not sentimental whims. This child is not our responsibility." The millionaire watched through the panoramic window as the girl played in the garden, trying to catch butterflies with her little hands. She had gained some weight in recent weeks, and her cheeks were no longer so sunken, but she still carried that fragility that constantly reminded him of how much suffering such a small child had already endured. "She has a name," he said calmly, without turning to face his mother. "It's Alice. And as long as she's under my roof, she will be treated with dignity." The revelation of the name had come only 3 days ago, when the girl finally managed to pronounce a few clearer words. Discovering her identity was just the first step in an investigation that was becoming more complex with each passing day. His older brother had developed a health condition that had been deteriorating rapidly. Doctors spoke of a degenerative disease that affected his ability to reason, partially explaining his erratic actions in recent months. During the lucid conversations he could still hold, he revealed crucial details about his encounters with Alice on the streets. "She was always on the same corner," the brother said on a particularly difficult afternoon, when his eyes could still focus clearly, "near the downtown square. Sometimes she slept in cardboard boxes. Other times she just sat on the sidewalk drawing things in the dirt with sticks." The millionaire had hired a private investigator, using part of his profits in cryptocurrency to fund the search for information about Alice's past. What they discovered in the first week was devastating. There were no official records of the child in any government system. It was as if she simply didn't exist in the bureaucratic world. The photograph found in the red bag became the only concrete clue. The investigator had shown the picture to dozens of people in the central area of the city and finally got a response that changed everything. A lady who sold flowers in the square recognized the woman in the photo. "That's Clara," the vendor said confidently. "She worked as a cleaner in some offices around here. Hard-working girl, always polite. But she disappeared out of nowhere, must be about 2 years ago." The connection with Clara led to an even more shocking discovery. Searching the human resources files of several companies in the region, the investigator found records of a Clara Santos who had worked for 6 months in the millionaire's own family business. She had been abruptly fired, with no detailed explanation in the documents, just a laconic note: "Termination for just cause, violation of internal policies." When the millionaire confronted the human resources manager about the case, the man became visibly uncomfortable. "It was a delicate situation," he explained, fidgeting nervously with the papers on his desk. "She was caught photographing confidential documents with her cell phone. Company policy, immediate dismissal." "What kind of documents?" pressed the millionaire. "Financial reports, budget spreadsheets, specifically documents related to our corporate social program." This revelation opened a new line of investigation that left the millionaire deeply disturbed. The family company's social program had been quietly cancelled 2 years ago, supposedly due to budget restructuring. The resources that were once intended to help needy families were redirected to increase shareholder dividends. Meanwhile, the legal situation was becoming dramatically complicated. The ex-bride had followed through on her threat and filed a lawsuit for emotional distress, demanding compensation of $20 million. Her lawyers argued that the public scandal had destroyed her social reputation and jeopardized her future marriage prospects within her social class. "She wants blood," commented the millionaire's lawyer during a tense meeting. "And she has sufficient financial resources to make this a long and costly battle." The pressure increased when other members of the local elite began to take sides. Entire families withdrew their investments from companies linked to the millionaire, significantly affecting his cash flow. His gold assets and international investments in euros still maintained his financial stability, but the network of relationships that had taken years to build was rapidly unraveling. Alice, unaware of all the turmoil her appearance had caused, showed signs of deep trauma. She woke up screaming during the early hours, calling for her mother. She refused to eat certain foods and had panic reactions when she saw metal objects being heated, suggesting traumatic experiences related to violence. The millionaire hired a child psychologist specializing in cases of abandonment. During the sessions, Alice began to reveal fragments of memories that painted an even darker picture of her past. She spoke of a dark house where she was alone for days, of people shouting a lot, and of her mother crying constantly before going away forever. She repeatedly mentions a place she calls the paper house, the psychologist reported. And she talks about her mother messing with important papers before disappearing. It may be related to her mother's workplace. The connection between Clara Santos, the confidential documents, and the cancellation of the social program was beginning to form a disturbing pattern. The millionaire spent entire nights reviewing old company records, looking for clues about what exactly Clara had discovered and why it had cost her her job. During one of these nights of investigation, he found something that made his blood run cold. In the digital files of the cancelled social program, there was a list of beneficiary families that included the name Clara Santos and minor daughter. The program not only helped financially, it also offered daycare and medical care for children of low-income employees. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. Clara was not just working at the company when she was fired. She and Alice were beneficiaries of the social program that his own family had eliminated to increase profits. Clara had lost not only her job, but also the only support she had to take care of her daughter. That same night, Alice had another terrible nightmare, and he ran to comfort her. As he rocked her back to sleep, she murmured something that made his heart stop. "Mommy said the bad men weren't going to let her come home." The discovery of the beneficiary list launched the millionaire into an obsessive investigative spiral that began to consume every moment of his waking life. 3 months had passed since the cancelled wedding, and Alice was now running through the halls of the mansion with more energy, her cheeks finally gaining the rosy color of a healthy child. But with each progression in her physical recovery, new layers of emotional trauma were revealed through her drawings and nightmares. The child psychologist had established a routine of sessions that allowed Alice to express her memories through art. Her drawings always included 3 disturbing elements: a woman crying surrounded by papers, men in suits pointing at a door, and a small child hiding under a table. The repetition of these symbols was no coincidence. "She is processing a traumatic separation," the doctor explained during a consultation. "The papers represent the last place where she saw her mother calm. The men in suits symbolize hostile authority, and the hidden child is herself, trying to become invisible during events she could not understand. Meanwhile, the millionaire's financial situation was deteriorating alarmingly. The ex-bride had managed to freeze a significant portion of his assets through a court order, arguing that he could transfer resources to tax havens to avoid paying compensation. His investments in bitcoins remained inaccessible due to legal complexities, and several partner companies had broken off lucrative contracts to avoid association with the child scandal. His mother intensified the family pressure, convening meetings with other shareholders to discuss his removal as CEO of the company. "He's completely lost his sense of priorities," she declared during these tense meetings. "He's jeopardizing decades of work because of a child who isn't even our legal responsibility." The ailing brother had entered a more serious phase of his degenerative condition, but during his moments of lucidity, he continued to reveal crucial information. One particularly clear afternoon, he confessed something that completely changed the course of the investigation. "I knew Clara better than I admitted," he said, his hands trembling as he held a cup of tea. "She came to me before she was fired. She was desperate, saying she had discovered something terrible in the company's documents." "What kind of thing?" pressed the millionaire, secretly recording the conversation. "The resources from the social program weren't just cancelled, they were diverted. Clara found transfers to the personal accounts of executives, including ours. She wanted to report it, but I convinced her to wait." The revelation was devastating. Clara Santos hadn't been fired for photographing random documents. She had discovered a corruption scheme within the family company itself, and the millionaire's brother had been complicit in silencing her. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" demanded the millionaire, his voice full of fury and disappointment. "Because I was involved," admitted the brother, tears streaming down his face. "Part of that money financed my own investments. When I found out about my illness, I used the profits to help children on the streets, trying to make up for what we had done." The connection finally made sense. The brother had found Alice on the streets because he was secretly looking for her, knowing that his family had destroyed Clara's life and consequently abandoned her daughter to her fate. His acts of charity weren't random kindness. They were attempts to repair a crime he had participated in. The private investigator managed to track Clara's last movements through bank records and neighbor testimonies. She had left Alice temporarily with an acquaintance, promising to return in a few days after resolving problems at work. But she never came back. Instead, she disappeared completely, leaving only a growing debt in the small apartment she rented. The woman who had temporarily cared for Alice revealed heartbreaking details during an emotional interview. "Clara was terrified when she left the girl with me," she said, dabbing tears with a worn tissue. "She said important men were threatening her, that it wasn't safe to stay in the city. She promised she'd be back in a week, but months went by." "What happened to Alice after that?" asked the investigator. "I couldn't afford to take care of her indefinitely. I have my own children to feed. After 3 months of waiting for Clara to return, I had to leave the girl with other people who also couldn't take care of her for very long." Alice's journey over the past 2 years was a nightmare of serial abandonment. She had gone through at least 6 different families, each keeping her for a few weeks or months before passing her on when the situation became unsustainable. Finally, she ended up completely alone on the streets, surviving through the occasional kindness of strangers and the secret care of the millionaire's ailing brother. During this period of devastating revelations, the legal pressure intensified dramatically. The ex-fiancé had hired a team of lawyers specializing in destroying reputations, and they began to leak distorted information to the press. Sensational headlines suggested that the millionaire was involved in child exploitation schemes and abandonment of children by wealthy families. The value of his stock market shares plummeted 40% in 2 weeks. Major investors withdrew their capital, and banks began to question the renewal of credit lines essential to keep his operations running. His net worth, built over a decade of hard work, was being systematically destroyed. Alice, realizing the growing tension in the house, began to exhibit regressive behaviors. She started wetting the bed again, stopped talking almost completely, and developed an intense fear of being alone, following the millionaire around the mansion like a silent shadow. The psychologist warned about the risks of secondary trauma. "She is absorbing the emotional stress of the adults around her," she explained. "Children at this age cannot process complex conflicts, but they intensely feel changes in the emotional environment." At this critical moment, the millionaire made a radical decision that shocked even his lawyers. He decided to liquidate his gold reserves and all his available investment funds, to hire a team of investigators specializing in missing persons, determined to find Clara alive, no matter the cost. "You're destroying your financial stability for a search that may be impossible," warned his lead attorney. "Clara could have been dead for years. Or she may be alive and desperate to reunite with her daughter," replied the millionaire. "And if she's alive, she deserves to know that Alice is safe." The decision to dramatically expand the search for Clara coincided with another disturbing revelation. Confidential documents leaked by a disgruntled former employee revealed that other executives of the family company knew about the scheme to divert social resources and had actively participated in the cover-up. Even more shocking was the discovery that similar practices were happening in other companies of the local elite. A systematic pattern of exploitation had developed. Social programs were created for marketing purposes and tax benefits, but the resources were secretly diverted to enrich the already wealthy. Alice wasn't just a victim of an individual crime. She was a symbol of a system of exploitation that had destroyed dozens of vulnerable families over the years. And now, inadvertently, she had become the catalyst that could expose this entire network of corruption. That night, while Alice slept peacefully after weeks of nightmares, the millionaire received a call that would change everything. The investigator had found a promising lead. Hospital records of a woman named Clara Santos, admitted to a hospital in a city 300 miles away, precisely during the period when she had disappeared. The trip to the city where Clara had been found was the longest of the millionaire's life. Alice slept in the back seat of the car, holding tightly to a teddy bear he had bought for her weeks ago. During the 4-hour drive, he alternated between desperate hope and paralyzing fear of what they might discover. The hospital was a modest public institution, very different from the private clinics he was used to frequenting. The social worker who greeted them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, explained the situation carefully. "Clara Santos was admitted here 2 years ago in critical condition," she said, consulting a thick folder. "She had suffered a serious bus accident on the highway. She was in a coma for 3 months, and when she woke up, she had severe amnesia. She couldn't remember her name, her family, anything about her past." The millionaire felt the world spin around him. "And where is she now?" "Working right here in the hospital. When she recovered physically, we offered her a job in cleaning and assisted housing until she recovered her memory or found her family. She adopted the name Maria since she didn't remember her real one." Alice had woken up during the conversation and was timidly holding the millionaire's hand. When the social worker mentioned the possibility of seeing Maria, the girl's eyes lit up with a hope she hadn't shown in months. The meeting took place in the hospital's inner garden. Clara, now called Maria, was watering flowers when they approached. She had aged considerably in the past 2 years. Her hair was grayer, and her face bore marks of deep suffering. But she was undeniably the woman in the photograph. Alice let go of the millionaire's hand and ran towards her mother, shouting, "Mommy! Mommy!" with an explosive joy that made everyone present cry. Clara dropped the watering can and stood paralyzed, her eyes filling with tears as fragments of memory began to return like devastating waves. "My girl, my Alice," she whispered, kneeling to hug her daughter. "I knew you existed somewhere. I dreamed of you every night, but I couldn't remember." The reunion was simultaneously the most beautiful and most painful moment the millionaire had ever witnessed. Mother and daughter hugged as if the world were about to end, years of separation and suffering dissolving in that simple hospital garden. In the weeks that followed, Clara's memory gradually returned. She remembered the accident. She had fled the city in desperation after receiving threats related to her discovery of the corruption scheme. The bus that would take her away, where she hoped to hide until she found a safe way to get Alice, had suffered the accident that changed everything. "I was trying to get to my sister in the countryside," Clara explained during one of the many conversations they had. "I wanted to get Alice as soon as I was sure it was safe, but when I woke up in the hospital, I didn't remember anything. I spent my days with a terrible feeling that I had lost something important, but I didn't know what." The revelation that Clara had survived and spent 2 years desperately searching for fragments of her lost identity was devastating for the millionaire. While Alice grew up traumatized on the streets, her mother was just a few miles away, living her own nightmare of amnesia and isolation. During this period of family reunification, the millionaire's ailing brother made a courageous decision that would change everything. In one of his last moments of clear lucidity, he recorded a complete testimony confessing his participation in the corruption scheme and revealing the names of all the other executives involved. "I can't leave this world carrying this weight," he told the camera, his voice weak but determined. "Alice and Clara deserve justice. All the families who were harmed deserve the truth." The testimony was delivered simultaneously to the district attorney's office and to the press, causing an earthquake in the local business elite. Investigations were opened, bank accounts were frozen, and several executives were arrested. The millionaire, despite not having directly participated in the scheme, decided to cooperate fully with the authorities. The ex-fiancé, realizing that the tide had turned completely against her and fearing being associated with the corruption scandal, abruptly withdrew her lawsuit. Her motivations had become transparent. She had known about the scheme from the beginning and planned to use that information to blackmail the millionaire after the wedding. "She contacted me a month before the wedding," revealed one of the investigators during his testimony. "Offered silence in exchange for a larger share of the illicit profits. It was a calculated operation from the start." With his integrity publicly restored and his assets unfrozen, the millionaire made the most important decision of his life. He voluntarily liquidated 60% of his assets to create a reparations fund to compensate all the families who had been harmed by the corrupt scheme of the social programs. But his transformation went beyond the financial aspect. Clara, now with her memory fully restored, revealed details about other similar cases she had witnessed before her own destruction. Together, they created a community support network that worked completely transparently, without bureaucracies that allowed for new diversions. Alice, finally reunited with her mother, began to flourish in ways that surprised even the psychologist. Her drawings changed dramatically. Instead of sad and hidden figures, she now drew smiling families, colorful houses, and gardens full of flowers. The nightmares ceased completely after the first month of restructured coexistence. The millionaire offered Clara and Alice a permanent home in his mansion, which had now transformed into an informal support center for other families in vulnerable situations. Clara agreed to work directly in the administration of the reparations fund, using her personal experience to identify and help genuine cases of need. "You didn't have to do any of this," Clara said one afternoon, as they watched Alice play in the garden with other children who now frequented the house. "Yes, I did," replied the millionaire. "My family destroyed your life and Alice's. Doing the minimum to repair that isn't kindness, it's justice. The ailing brother spent his last months seeing the positive result of his confession. The corruption network had been completely dismantled, and the money recovered was being used to recreate genuine social programs throughout the region. He departed in peace, knowing that he had finally done the right thing. 6 months after the reunion at the hospital, Alice turned 5 years old. Her birthday party was celebrated in the mansion's garden, with dozens of children and families who had benefited from the new community support system. She blew out the candles on the cake, asking that all the children in the world have their mummies back. Clara had become not only a mother again, but a respected community leader. Her experience of loss and recovery transformed her into a powerful advocate for the rights of vulnerable families. She personally coordinated each case served by the fund, ensuring that no family went through what she and Alice had faced. The millionaire discovered that his true wealth wasn't in his investments or properties, but in the family he had chosen to protect and the community they had built together. His new businesses focused on social sustainability and total transparency, proving that it was possible to generate profits without exploiting the vulnerable. Alice grew up knowing that she had been the catalyst for a transformation that benefited hundreds of families. Her courage to interrupt that wedding, driven only by the childlike instinct to seek help, had triggered a revolution of conscience that changed an entire community. The final scene of the story finds the three of them, Clara, Alice, and the millionaire, sitting in the same garden where they had reunited, planning the expansion of the support program to other cities. Alice, now a confident and radiant child, drew her expanded family. A large house full of smiling people, all connected by colored lines that she explained were threads of love. True wealth, they all discovered, lay in the ability to transform suffering into hope, trauma into healing, and isolation into community. And it had all started with a courageous little girl who refused to remain invisible. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10. And thank you very much.